Right?
Right, it's 6, it's time to go.
Okay, so my name is Britta Wenzel, and I'm the Executive Director of Save Barnegat Bay. You can just call me Britta if you want to interject with a question. And I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of our organization, Manchester Township, and the Manchester Environmental Commission. We are hoping to present to you tonight a comprehensive workshop to talk about rain barrels and their value to Barnegat Bay and our watershed. We have split up the presentation, planned it to be an hour long, and then we will stick around afterwards for question and answer period. But we know your time is valuable, and we're glad that you joined us this evening. So the first portion of the presentation, I will be talking about Barnegat Bay, where it is, what it is, why it's important, our organization, Save Barnegat Bay, who we are, what we do. And then I'm going to pass it over to Karen Argenti, who's one of our board members. So you met her earlier in the program. She's also a resident of Manchester Township and has been playing a great leadership role in the organization alongside the Environmental Commission and the Mayor and Council, Planning Board, and other agencies within the township. And then we'll turn it over to Grace Ann Taylor, who's our Education and Outreach Coordinator, who will get into the literal nuts and bolts of building a rain barrel and how to put it together. And then we will make available to you for pickup tomorrow and Friday at our Eco Center in Toms River, your barrel and all the materials to put together the barrel. So that's sort of the lineup for the evening. It should take an hour. With some time afterward for question and answers. So again, my name is Britta. I'm the Executive Director for Save Barnegat Bay, and welcome and thank you for joining us. I wanted to take a moment to introduce your mayor, Mayor Ken Palmer, who's joined us tonight, and offer him to say a few words. We're just feeling so fortunate to work with Manchester Township and the mayor directly on so many important environmental issues. And I know you don't know this, Mayor Palmer, but tonight we are kicking off our Barnegat Bay grant cycle. We got a grant from the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, to work closely with townships in the Barnegat Bay Watershed. And we couldn't think of a better township to kick off our program with. So thank you, Mayor Palmer, and if you'd like to say a few words.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me. I guess Britta and I met each other about 4 years ago, and since then, she's been very active with the township, helping us out with applying for some grants from the DEP and getting our environmental commission rocking and rolling. Karen's played a big part in that, as well as Peggy. Peggy has been instrumental, and this program is it's a simple one, the rain barrels, but it makes sense. It helps everybody, certainly with stormwater runoff, which is really the biggest concern for the Barnegat Bay, something that we all can kind of make a dent in. The rain barrel program really does help, and it's a good thing for your house. It's a quick way of making a difference, so it's certainly worthwhile, and we're proud to put it on and partner with the Save Barnegat Bay as well as our Environmental Commission. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Karen, we'll slide down and open that slide on Barnegat Bay.
So here we are.
So I'm going to give you the basics on Barnegat Bay. Many people might be sitting in their homes thinking, well, what does Manchester have to do with Barnegat Bay as a resident? Now, of course, you're going over to the bay to enjoy it, possibly fishing, crabbing, swimming, or deriving some other quality of life from the bay. But the bay is really the largest body of water in the state of New Jersey. And most people don't realize that, even though we live here. And it starts in a little town called Bay Head, or the head of the bay. Now, there's lots of people walking around in Bay Head with a sweatshirt on that says Bay Head, but don't realize that that's why the town is named that. It goes all the way down the Barrier Island, past Seaside Heights, past the Barnegat Inlet, all the way to the bottom of LBI, or Long Beach Island, to Little Egg Harbor. And then it has something called a watershed, which is the land area that drains down to the bay. So there's all these rivers, creeks, and streams, as you can see. And the area that's highlighted in the yellow is the area that drains down to the bay. The important things I wanted to point out to you is that the bay is the largest body of water in the state, that the entire bay fits inside of Ocean County, and that most of the watershed, or the area of land that drains to the bay, fits in Ocean County, with the exception of a little bit in the north in Monmouth County that drains down to the bay. So most of Manchester Township drains down to Barnegat Bay. So that means that everything you put on your land, in your yard, eventually finds its way to Barnegat Bay. So here we're talking about a watershed, and the way that this works is that the rivers, creeks, and streams, so the fresh water comes out of the land, typically at a spot called the headwater. So it's coming out of groundwater out of the land, and it forms a river, creek, or stream. And so the water is flowing, fresh water, down to the bay. And at those 3 points, the Point Pleasant or Manasquan Inlet, the Barnegat Inlet, and the Little Egg Harbor Inlet, salt water is coming in from the ocean. And what makes an estuary so important, so the bay is considered an estuary because the fresh and the salt water are mixing, which forms something called brackish water. And it's the place where fish, crabs, other marine life, and birds are migrating through, and they're having a chance to reproduce, to grow, to have their young, and enter the next life cycle. So essentially that's what a watershed is, and Manchester is in Barnegat Bay Watershed, most of it in. I'm moving around a lot, Karen.
Sorry.
That's okay. So how does development impact the water cycle or stormwater runoff? Essentially, what has happened and why we need to save Barnegat Bay, hence our name, is that Ocean County at one point during the last 40 years was the fastest growing county in the whole country. We went from 180,000 people to just about 600,000 people overnight. Much of the land became developed. So instead of a raindrop hitting natural land, where you can see in the first section there 10%, so the water falling out of the sky would hit natural land and get absorbed by the trees, to some development and even more development. So what does that mean? Are we suburban? Are we urban? Are we metropolitan? And there are parts of Ocean County that now would constitute actually urban, which means that that drop of water that comes out of the sky, instead of hitting natural land and getting absorbed back into the soils, replenishing the groundwater, it's running off of that hard surface and down the drain and into those rivers, creeks, and streams, and eventually the bay. Move on to the next slide. So what we're really wanting to happen and how we can fix a lot of the problems, both the pollution that's running into the bay off of that runoff of the hard surfaces, and also replenishing our drinking water supplies underneath the land, is to try to get back to a natural hydrological cycle, or the water cycle where the rain gets absorbed into the land, and in that process it gets filtered and cleaned and then replenishes groundwater and keeps our rivers, lakes, streams, and creeks and bays clean. So that's what we're trying to do, and that is really why we're calling you together tonight. Go to the next slide. So Rain Barrel is the homeowner's choice of how you can be a part of the solution directly. As Mayor Palmer said, it's an inexpensive way to be a part of the solution. It helps your town combat flooding in the streets. It helps you have water to water your plants in your garden or wash your car, which we'll get into a little bit later. But it's your personal way of contributing to the solution and getting that water back into the land where it fell down out of the sky. So going to the next slide. A little bit, just a quick glimpse about who Save Barnegat Bay is. So we are a local environmental organization. We started with neighbors at a kitchen table from Bricktown and Maniloking, fighting an overdevelopment project. And next year, we will actually be 50-year-old organization. So we do have a board of directors. I told you that Karen is on our board. It's made up of residents and taxpayers that are Ocean County folk. And we're neighbors. We're a giant kitchen table, we call it, of neighbors who come to us with environmental issues and concerns. And it includes the mayors, the councils, the planning boards, the zoning boards. We try really hard to help everyone in the watershed, which is a big job. We employ myself, Grace Ann, and a part-time bookkeeper. We will be hiring soon for a few posts that we receive some grant work to do. But you can go to our website and see more about our accomplishments, which are highlighted on this link here. And those stars represent overdevelopment projects that we have beat developers in most cases and conveyed the land to some natural open space to the public. I think there's a star right there for Heritage Minerals, which is a site in your township that we would really love to see be natural open space. That would be our preferred outcome for that site. So you can visit us at our Eco Center. There's the address. That's where you will be picking up your rain barrel either tomorrow or the next day. And of course, if those 2 dates for pickup don't work out, please let us know separately through an email and we will accommodate you. I know everybody has kind of funny work schedules with the COVID environment. And this is a little history of Save Barnegat Bay. It's on our website. And it'll give you a little background behind what has happened over the 50 years, just timeline of events. And you can see the various problems that have surfaced over the years, and then our success stories and present day problems and trends. So I think that's it for me.
Yes. Let me see. Okay, so I'm Karen Argenti, and I'm here to talk to you about green infrastructure. You have a little hint about it already. It's the practice of looking at nature with an eye towards mimicking it so that we don't have to, we have to capture the water where it falls. The importance of that is that it keeps the aquifers very productive and it stops the runoff at the same time. So what happens when water hits the land, there's all these little tunnels in the ground, which the ants have made. And we have a lot of plants that have long roots, like these native plants here, which we use in green infrastructure. We use native plants because they're from the area, which is a good thing to do. And the other thing is, here's what non-native plants' roots are like. This is what the native plants' roots are. So the longer the root, the easier it is to get the water down into the area that we want. Water actually travels down into the ground and figures out a way to get to the nearest lake, river, or stream. And that's the natural way to do things. What we've managed to do is we put a lot of heavy duty construction on the land, and we have the water going over the land into the water body. And when it goes over the land into the water body, it's filled with pollutants and other kinds of things that you really don't want in your drinking water. So in case you think that native plants are not so pretty, here's a bunch of native plants. They're really kind of pretty. You know some of them by sight. And so it's not really that hard to move from, a plant that has short roots to a plant that has some long, deep roots, and that you don't have to water as much as well. And of course, the best green infrastructure ever is a tree, which is why it's so important to make sure that we preserve our trees and have them there to take care of what's going on. So now I want to talk a little bit about flooding and how green infrastructure works to reduce flooding. So we all know that this flooding that we have on our streets, which is kind of interesting because we really aren't that, we don't have that much impervious surface that we would have so much flooding. So you might know that we had a big rainstorm a couple of days ago in June, like June 5th. This is not actually from June 5th. And you can see that the tree is having a great time here, and that The water is falling like crazy. And it's getting absorbed by the tree, but it's not getting absorbed by on the street. This storm was, there was an advisory that went out from our town office. I don't know if you're all signed up to Nixle, but that you have to be careful because there's a lot of flooding going on. And basically, I checked the next day on the Weather Channel, and what we had was 1.34 inches of rain, and yesterday, and that's not really a lot of rain. That's sort of like what the general position, that's 90% of the storms are 1.25 inches of rain. So this is not even a lot of rain, and it caused a problem of flooding on our streets. I mean, it wasn't a really bad flooding problem, but we're in Manchester, so we have 17% urbanized area. That's the red area on this map here. So we're at 17%, which is pretty good. Basically, scientists have come to the conclusion that someplace between 10 and 20% leads to degradation in the water body. And so we need to be very careful not to go above that. And even Tom Schuler, who is the big scientist working on the Watershed Institute down in the Chesapeake Bay, that he went so far as to say 2%. So we're never going to get back to 2%, but we should strive to keep up, making the areas more pervious so that we can absorb the rain at the water's edge. And so that we don't have to end up having to filter our runoff because it has to go into a tunnel, a pipe, and then has to be taken care of before it gets discharged into the water body. And I guess that's all I really wanted to say. So my next person is Grace Ann Taylor.
All right, everyone. So hopefully you are convinced by now that having a rain barrel is important for green infrastructure, and which is just a fancy way of saying mimicking nature to absorb stormwater. So a rain barrel can be constructed in all different ways. I was trained by Rutgers to build rain barrels through the Department of Environmental Protection back when I served AmeriCorps. And so this resource is easily available on Rutgers' website, and I can send it to anyone who needs it. And so that's who I was taught to build a rain barrel from. However, if you go on YouTube or any other source, you can find lots of different methods. So I'm going to share with you my method in hopes that it gives you a launch point to design your own if you feel inspired, or at least get this barrel complete. So tomorrow and Friday, you will have an opportunity to pick up the barrels from us, and they will have all of the tools with the exception of the two that you see here in this picture. So I am not supplying plumber's tape because that comes in a larger roll and you really just need a very small piece. And I am not supplying silicone because, again, it comes in a large quantity and you can purchase that on your own. We specified what kind of silicone you need, but as long as it is watertight, waterproof, outdoor, rated for outdoor use, it should be fine. I always say that the plumber's tape and the silicone are really like double stops, because what happens is those threads you see on the left-hand side on that faucet is going to somewhat create a seal of its own, and then you're putting plumber's tape on top and silicone. So what you're going to do is you're going to get all this hardware, and you're going to get a faucet, which you see in the picture, and the faucet is going to go in the lower part of the barrel so that you can harvest the water. And so I highly recommend that you use the faucet to create a thread in the barrel before you do any caulking and any plumber's tape. Use that faucet to create threads in both the bottom hole and the top hole, which I'll show you in a minute. And what you're going to do is make sure that it's really straight when you put it on, and then once you unscrew it again, make sure that you use one layer of plumber's tape and one small bead of caulk, and then you're going to screw in the faucet using your hand, and then when you do the overflow that's on the top of the barrel, you're going to make sure you use pliers. And so what you see, hang on, Karen, hang on. What you see here in this picture is the participants putting lock nuts and silicone on the inside back of that hardware. So you're going to screw the hardware into the front of the barrel in both the overflow and in the faucet. And then you're going to have to reach inside of the barrel to screw the back of the lock nut on, which is in the next photo. And the lock nut goes on the back of both the faucet and the overflow. And what you see on the far left there, the lock nut is on top of a mesh screening. That mesh screening is going to be extremely important so that you can keep mosquitoes out of your barrel. So you're going to take a small piece of that mesh screening and place it on the top back of your overflow so that no mosquitoes can get inside. So I'll show you a better picture when we keep scrolling. So once you've put that hardware together and you have a nice seal on there, that's what it should look like. You want to make sure that the hexagonal piece of the faucet is flush with the concave side of the barrel, and that you've used the silicone and the plumber's tape to seal that hole so that it doesn't leak on you. We've already done the hardest part in drilling. We've already drilled all the holes in your barrel, and so you don't have to worry about that. But if you do decide to do it on your own, please use safety equipment. So this little piece is called an overflow, a hose adapter. So when you get it, it's extremely important that you pay attention to which side you are mounting inside of the barrel. When you're looking at your overflow, if you're having trouble deciding which side goes into the barrel, all you have to do is match it to the faucet piece. So the end of the faucet piece that goes into the barrel and the end of the overflow that goes into the barrel match. Their threads should look identical. So that's how you determine which side goes inside the barrel. The opposite side of that overflow is going to allow you to connect your barrel to an overflow soaker hose or another rain barrel. And if you hook it up the wrong way, it's going to make things more difficult. So you are going to do the same thing. You're going to wrap the side that's going in the male portion of the adapter into your rain barrel. You're going to wrap once with plumber's tape. Then you're going to put a bead of caulk on it. And then you're going to use pliers to screw it into the barrel. So if you can scroll down a little bit, you're going to use pliers. Those threads get kind of sharp, so please don't use your fingers. And if you want to use a pair of gloves or just protect your fingers from silicone, it is mildly toxic and sticky, so it's your choice. It won't kill you if you wash your hands afterwards, so just make sure you protect yourself as needed. Screw your barrel in again, screw it in the barrel again, making sure that that hexagon piece is flush with the barrel. And then same as with your faucet, you're going to make sure that the lock nut is locked on the back. And so what I was saying before with that mesh, because that overflow is a big empty ring, you don't want mosquitoes to get in there. The faucet has hardware and will block the mosquitoes, but the overflow is open, and so you don't want that to be open to mosquitoes. So what you need to do is take a small piece of that mesh that I will give you and put it on the back of your overflow, and then put the lock nut right over it. It should just slide right over both the screening and the faucet hardware itself. So that will make sure mosquitoes don't get in. In addition, you're going to get a basket that is shaped more square shaped than that. This is just a different example. And you're going to wrap that basket upside, like an upside down Easter basket. So you want to make sure that the bunching of your screening that I'm going to give you goes inside of the barrel. So you're going to wrap that basket, and so that just push a little divot in the top just so that there's kind of a little space to catch debris, and then wrap that mesh around and put a zip tie on the bottom, and then shove the whole thing in the top of the barrel. For the most part, that mesh is going to fill in the imperfections of the cut hole in the top. If for some reason you don't have a full filled top, you just want to make sure that you use any extra mesh to cover those holes. Most of your barrels have 2 white caps on either side because our barrels are recycled from the local marinas, and so they had non-toxic antifreeze inside of them. They have been rinsed, but you might like to clean them out before you use them. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but they should have 2 white caps. If they don't have 2 white caps, I'll give you extra screening and zip ties to make sure you cover all of the entrances and holes in your barrel so that there's less chance of mosquitoes getting in. So once your barrel is completely constructed, this process takes all of 10-15 minutes. It shouldn't be too complicated. If you're nervous about it, certainly bring your computer or your phone into the garage on Wednesday night of next week, and I can talk you through anything that you're, if you need any help with anything. Once you screw the hardware in with silicone, it's going to be extremely difficult to get it out, and sticky and just icky and messy. So if you're nervous about anything, just tune in with me next week. If you're confident to do it on your own, more power to you. So once you have it all together, you're going to need to do a little bit of retrofitting at your home with installing your barrel. So that picture in the center is really great. You do need to raise it up a little bit because logistically getting a watering can beneath that rain barrel is going to be extremely difficult because it is very low to the ground. And the reason we do that is because we want you to have the highest potential of using as much water in the barrel as possible. So you want to raise it up a little bit, and that also gives it level ground and holds the weight. You're going to need to build a little bit of a platform. You can use anything that will hold the weight of the barrel. And so this right here is an example, and then you're going to have to cut your downspout or retrofit your downspout. So the first image that Karen is showing you is stormwater drain that goes into the ground as opposed to spilling off into a little concrete pad. The hardest thing about this is that each and every one of you has a very different home and system. You're going to need to figure out what works best for you. If you have any questions, again, please reach out to us. So in this system, the rainwater actually goes down into the ground, is piped beneath your yard, and comes out at the curb side, which you'll see in a picture coming up. So in this case, you're going to need a few extra parts from the hardware store. Ken's Hardware in Toms River is extremely familiar with rain barrels and always help me find everything I need. Home Depot and Lowe's also have all the supplies that you need. So here again is that level platform that you can build. You can use anything from cinder blocks to sand, anything that you have laying around that will hold the weight of a 416-pound full barrel. Make sure that you measure twice and cut once. And then once you cut your downspout, you have options. In this example, they take the bottom elbow of your downspout and they reattach it to the middle of the downspout. At the Barnegat Bay Eco Center, you'll see tomorrow that we have these like long drinking straw kind of plastic tubes that we connect to the storm drain. So there's lots of different options that you can pick from. Don't throw any of your hardware away. Make sure you hang on to it because you're going to need to reattach all these parts when you take your rain barrel in for the winter time. So you wouldn't want the rainwater spilling off from the middle of your house during the winter time. So you're going to want to make sure you reattach those pipes so that the water redirects down to the ground. So having a rain barrel is extremely easy, but does require a few little nuancy things. So you want to make sure that you take your rain barrel in the winter time. As you know, water expands when it freezes, and that will severely damage the hardware and the plastic of your rain barrel. So obviously just watch the temperatures. Make sure that you take it inside or turn it upside down outside and cover it. The main thing is that you just want to make sure it stays empty. In addition, rain barrels offer a lot of advantages because they don't have the water that ends up in your rain barrel doesn't have the salts and chemicals that your water has when it's coming out of your tap. So it's going to be closer to the pH of the plants that you're using it on. So speaking of use, you want to make sure that you're using your rain barrel water properly. If you're using moss killer on your roof, please be aware of that. Don't use it if you're going to harvest your rainwater out of your rain barrel. That's not going to be good. And you want to make sure that that you never cook with that water and that you never drink that water. It is not potable. It is not rated for you to be using it to consume it at all. If for some reason you would like to use it to on ornamental or on vegetables, edible plants, you can get that water tested. If you want to use it in a koi pond, you can also get that water tested. And some other uses for your rain barrel water, which is much safer. You can use it to wash your dog, wash your sailboat, rinse your muddy feet, rinse outdoor play equipment, fill bird baths, wash the car, water the ornamental garden like your native plant garden that you're all going to have now that you know what they are. And of course, like I said, you can get that water tested if you're going to use it for your koi or your edible plants. Please make sure that you take some time to clean your barrel out with a mild bleach solution just to kill anything in there. And on that same note, you're going to need to make sure that you use the water in your barrel because of a few different things. So you have the risk of algae growing, and algae is just a natural part of having, algae is an aquatic photosynthesizing organism. It uses sunlight to photosynthesize to make energy. So any sunlight that can penetrate that blue barrel or through the top is going to grow that plant material inside. So you want to make sure you use that water and clean your barrel periodically, but you also want to make sure that you don't get mosquitoes. So real quick, we can talk about mosquitoes. The risk of mosquitoes, I learned from Karen the other day that they take 2 weeks to reproduce. Their larvae reproduce in water, and then that the flying insect becomes the biting pest that we all dislike very much, but is important for the ecosystem. And what happens is the still water is what the mosquito larvae really love. So in order to prevent them from being in your barrel, you need to make sure that all of the holes and entrances are covered with that mesh, that you use the water and keep it clean, especially because if you use the water, you'll have the barrel empty for the next rainstorm, which is good for everyone and good for you because you get the highest capacity of your rain barrel. And there are some other options that you can employ to make sure that you don't have mosquitoes. One natural way to do it is to use an oil. So you can actually just put a layer of vegetable oil on the top of your rain barrel. That might sound bizarre because you wouldn't want to do that if you're watering plants. However, if you've ever shaken a bottle of dressing, you know that oil sits on top of the water. So if you don't use that top layer and just let it settle after a rainstorm, just use the water until it gets to that level. So that was a method that I was taught. I'll be honest in saying I don't use it, but it is a way for you to naturally keep that layer, that top layer of water where the mosquitoes are breeding, uninhabitable for them. And then Rob says here, okay, so someone's jumping in the chat talking about dunks, mosquito dunks. They are sold at the hardware store. They are larvicide, so they supposedly kill mosquito larvae, but we are trying not to encourage the use of those because pesticides and herbicides are the exact thing that we're trying to prevent from being carried into our waterways via stormwater. So if you're using it in your rain barrel, potentially you're using something that could hurt the environment, but they do sell them. They are rated for certain tasks, and so obviously use your best judgment. But it is an option, but we're not advocating for it because we really want to keep as much pesticides and pollution out of our waterways. So if you just give me 1 second, I want to check my notes to make sure that I gave you all of the right info. You want to make sure you use your water within a week. Oh, and if you want, you can hook up more rain barrels to get more water capacity. So if you really love this project and you find a better way to do it, certainly use that overflow that you saw at the top of the barrel to hook it up to another barrel. Again, your full barrel is 416 pounds approximately full. So you're not going to want to be moving it, and you're not going to want it to fall over when it is full. So just keep that in mind. And so another quick tidbit, your rain barrel has the potential, if used between the months of April and October, to catch 1,400 gallons of water. So that's a whole lot of water that you can save and reuse. So hopefully you have fun with this project. And then when we finish today, I'll go over the logistics of pickup. And that's what I have.
Okay, so we just want to say that we have special thanks to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for funding our non-point education of municipal officials, which we call NEMO. I have no idea where to find the chat.
I have the chat here. Thank you, Rob, for telling us about the dunks. Right. And we have some links to those here in the chat. Britta, thank you for that. And Rob's mentioning BTI, approved by the EPA and considered non-toxic for humans, animals, plants. And he attached the link from the CDC for you all. So if anyone has any questions right now, you can either place them in the chat box, which we see on the side of our screen, or you can unmute yourself to
Grace Ann.
Yeah.
There is a question I think is worth stating out loud that was directed to me about whether or not people will be able to get those instructions. So if you could repeat that part again. And we are recording this workshop, and the idea would be that we could share it with you afterwards. So if you want to watch the recording again and hear the instructions again, you'd be able to do that in the next day or two.
Well, we could give them the links of the 2 documents that from Retrofitting.
Yes, she can go over that now.
Yeah, so I'll put it in the chat when I'm done speaking, but the Rutgers website has an exceptional amount of resources. This one presentation is just a very, very small teaser, if you will, of the info that you can get on the Rutgers website. And so we linked it here, and I'll link it again in the chat in a second. And they give you a much more in-depth of like all the to-dos about rain barrels, and I'll put them in there, and then you can even find more on there. And then don't forget, if you're nervous about any of the construction, confused about anything, again, I'll be here on Wednesday of this same time next week in my working clothes, my gross clothes, to kind of walk you through putting a rain barrel together.
So you're going to send out a follow-up email to everyone, and you'll include that link and the link to this presentation so they can access it at any time to go back at it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then I think one point that I always find important to talk about is, Karen, maybe you can zoom down to the images of putting the rain barrel together.
Okay.
A little bit further, right there where the people are laying on the ground. So 2 things, and this question's coming up also, that the holes are pre-drilled. Grace Ann has already pre-drilled the holes into your barrel. So one on the bottom where the person's almost kneeling down there, which is where the spigot fixture will go. And then one at the top there near his belly, which is the overflow valve. And you see how these people appear to be playing like, what's that old game, Twister, where it's not easy actually to get that spigot fixture into the bottom with the lock nut. It's a little bit of an exercise. You definitely probably need 2 people. You'll see that in both pictures. And I would say that's probably the most challenging of all the components of putting it together. Wouldn't you agree, Grace Ann? Yes,
definitely. And I actually moved up the hardware 1 inch. Usually I try to put it further down, but knowing that that's a thing that like I have had in the past, I moved it up 1 inch for the drilling of these barrels. And I just, as a little funny, one of my Watershed Ambassador colleagues is on with her friend, or with her family here, who was taught how to drill rain barrels with me many years ago. And she was like, did you drill them already? And I was like, aren't you lucky? Everything is drilled already and you don't have to do any of that. And then she was seeing the picture there and she said, that's to use small children. So if you have little ones and you want to have them crawl inside of the barrel, they can help you screw that lock nut in on the back. So yeah, there's some entertaining photos of trying to get people to put that on there.
And then another thing that we didn't talk about is, are you giving them a sanding block? Because you can sand the outside of the plastic, like rough it up a bit. And if you have artsy, craftsy folks in your family, or maybe grandchildren, or you just want to decorate it yourself, you can use a latex paint and you could make it rather decorative for your yard instead of just a, oh, there's a picture, instead of a blue barrel. Now that's quite artistic. But you can, you know, people have done it with lighthouses or birds or butterflies, things like that, and make it quite decorative instead of that industrial blue looking barrel.
Our friend Rob jumped in again. Thank you, Rob, for the resource. Karen, can you pull up a picture of a downspout diverter? Rob is pointing out that he did purchase one. So for those of you who want something really sleek, you can place a downspout diverter on your downspout. And what that does is it allows you to leave the whole downspout mostly constructed all of the year. And then the diverter just goes into your rain barrel instead of kind of what I was describing where you detach the bottom and reattach the top. Or detach the bottom and reattach the very bottom. So the downspout diverter allows you to leave everything all streamlined. And then what it does is as the rain barrel fills, once the rain barrel is full and the diverter then sends the rest of the rainwater down through the downspout as it naturally did before. So that allows you to, it's just another way to retrofit your downspout. So as you can see, Karen is on Google, and a quick search, you can find every different design in the world, apparently. I didn't even realize there were so many. So you can definitely pick what's best for you in your home. I always emphasize that during workshops. You're going to have to do what you feel is best as you put it all together. So here's one I do know Ken's Hardware sells this model. We do have one at the Eco Center that we haven't tried using yet, but basically what it does is it fills the barrel, and then once the barrel is at capacity, the rest of the water passes straight down into your regular.
So you don't need the overflow on this one because the overflow will be part of the downspout diverter.
Yes, and another point to that also, please make sure when you arrange your barrel along your home, don't allow the overflow or any water stream to be directed towards your home. That's not going to be good for the foundation of your home. So just make sure that you are cognizant of which direction your overflow is facing. The way I drilled it, that shouldn't be a problem, but just as a note.
Yeah, that Odie one that you just popped up before is the one that I have. I love that one because it's just got like a red cap that you can cap it in the winter for when you move it. That way it's not going to frost over. And then you kind of just buy an extension hose and it can aim it kind of right into the top so there's no lost water.
Nice.
Thank you, Rob.